Bourgeoisie relatives. So today, this isn't follow that flow. This is just another random video. But I wanted to go through some science on something that I talked about in a previous episode. It had to do with that company Taurus Tech, that free energy model that I was showing you guys, and what this science is like, how that works. How does it work? Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through this paper or this it's called Kozyrev, Ether, Time, and Torsion. Okay, so this is on David Wilcock's website, divinecosmos.com. I decided to do this because I talked about Nassim Haramein's free energy model, and he talks about the Taurus in all living things. If you watch The Connected Universe, which I had bought that, I was like, you go to resonance.is, that website that I showed you where the all the science is and stuff. But anyways, let's go through this. This article is from, it's almost 10 years old. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, coming up. Today's the 8th. This was the 11th of February, May, back in 2007. So let's get going here. What is this about? Let's check it out. An excerpt of our 2002 magnum opus on torsion field pioneer Dr. Nikolai Kozyrev recently made it into Nexus magazine, and then into Frontier Scientist Sepp Hasselberger's blog. Take a look. So there's a link there. Now this is something I was talking about. I actually emailed David's webmaster, and if you click on this, I don't know, whatever. I don't know. But anyways, let's move on. Kozyrev, Ether, Time, and Torsion. The Russian scientist Dr. Nikolai Kozyrev is in many ways a forerunner, the father of today's efforts to reinterpret physics in a way that does not contradict intuitive understanding. Our efforts to reconcile the inherent contradictions of the standard model of physics, firmly based as it is on Einstein's relativity and quantum mechanics, have brought less than satisfying results. And there's a picture of Mr. Kozyrev there. I wonder what year that's from. Is it 1983? Yeah. So it must have been back in like the 50s, 40s, or something like that. Kozyrev has measured spin or torsion field effects at a time when Western science was busy smashing atoms into ever smaller fractions. He investigated time and the ether before most of us in the West ever thought of questioning the workability of our modern interpretations of the universe. A most welcome effort to increase our awareness of Kozyrev's outstanding work is a book chapter on David Wilcock's site, which is the site that we're on, divinecosmos.com, which introduces him with the following words. Dramatic scientific evidence that all of physical matter is formed by an ether of invisible, conscious energy has existed since at least the 1950s. Renowned Russian astrophysicist Dr. Nikolai A. Kozyrev, born in 1908, died in 1983. That's where it was. Pronounced Kozyrev. Proved beyond any doubt that such an energy had to exist, and as a result, he became one of the most controversial figures in the history of the Russian scientific community. The awesome implications of his work and of all those who followed him were almost entirely concealed by the former Soviet Union. But with the fall of the Iron Curtain and the advent of the internet, we are finally gaining access to Russia's best-kept secret. 2 generations of remarkable research by thousands of PhD-level specialists have emerged from Kozyrev's seed findings. With our prominent mention of him in this book, We hope to permanently establish his historical importance and impact to our colleagues and readers. After having heard of Kozyrev in the 90s, I came upon his name again in a recent issue of Nexus magazine, where a summarized version of David Wilcock's book chapter is published under the title The Aether Science of Dr. N.A. Kozyrev. That short version, published in Nexus, is copied here. So there it is. All right. The Ether Science of Dr. N.A. Kozyrev by David Wilcock back in 2016. So, man, that's already 11 years. As time flies. Like that Porcupine Tree song. Such a good band. Anyways, a dramatic scientific evidence that all of physical matter is formed by an aether of invisible conscious energy has existed for decades. Renowned Russian astrophysicist Dr. Nikolai A. Kozyrev proved beyond any doubt that such an energy source had to exist, and as a result, he became one of the most controversial figures in the history of the Russian scientific community. The awesome implications of his work and of the work of all those who followed him were almost entirely concealed by the former Soviet Union, but with the fall of the Iron Curtain and the advent of the internet, we are finally gaining access to Russia's best-kept secret. 2 generations of remarkable research by thousands of PhD-level specialists has emerged from Kozyrev's seed findings, which completely change our understanding of the universe. An unseen medium of energy. The ether's existence was widely accepted without question in scientific circles until the early 20th century, when the Michelson-Morley experiment of 1887 was co-opted to prove that no such hidden energy source existed. However, more recent breakthroughs involving dark matter, dark energy, virtual particles, vacuum flux, and zero-point energy, to name a few, have brought reluctant Western scientists to acknowledge that there must indeed be an unseen energy medium throughout the universe. As long as you use a benign term like quantum medium and not the forbidden word ether, you can talk about it in the mainstream press without much fear of ridicule. One early example of proof for the existence of ether comes from the respected scientist Dr. Hal Puthoff. He frequently mentions experiments from the early 20th century conducted before quantum mechanics theory even existed that were designed to see if there is any energy in empty space. In order to test this idea in the laboratory, it was necessary to create an area that was completely free of air, a vacuum, and lead shielded from all known electromagnetic radiation fields by using what is known as a Faraday cage. This airless vacuum space was then cooled down to absolute zero, or negative 273 degrees Celsius, the temperature where all matter should stop vibrating and thus produce no heat. These experiments proved that instead of an absence of energy in the vacuum, there is a tremendous amount of it from a completely non-electromagnetic source. Dr. Puthoff has often called this a seething cauldron of energy in very high magnitudes. Since this energy could still be found at absolute zero, this force was dubbed zero-point energy, or ZPE, whereas Russian scientists usually call it the physical vacuum, or PV. Established mainstream physicists Dr. John Wheeler and Dr. Richard Feynman calculated that the amount of zero-point energy in the space volume of a single light bulb is powerful enough to bring all the world's oceans to the boiling point. Basically, yeah, like a teacup full of this energy, if released all at once, will boil all the oceans off, all the water in the world. It'll instantly evaporate it. So that's, I thought that was pretty cool. This zero-point energy is pretty important stuff to know. So Richard Feynman, if you ever heard of the Feynman diagrams, if you're into physics at all, that's who Richard Feynman is. The Feynman diagrams. Dude is a nut. Man, David Wilcock has this video of him playing bongos, talking about his breakfast, being. It made me laugh out loud. Made me LOL literally. And just it was David that made me laugh. Cause otherwise I don't think that stuff would have been really funny. But whatever. Clearly, we are not dealing with some weak, unseen force, rather, a source of almost impossibly grand power, which would have more than enough strength to sustain the existence of all physical matter. In the new view of science that is emerging from ether theory, all four of the basic force fields, whether gravity, electromagnetism, weak nuclear force, or strong nuclear force, are simply different forms of the ether or zero-point energy. Professor M.T. Daniels found that the density of the gravitational energy near the surface of the Earth is equal to 5.74 times 10 to the 10th power. Let us not forget that gravity would simply be another form of ether in this new model. Professor Daniels' findings means that drawing a sizable 100 kilowatts of this free energy power from the gravitational field dips into an extremely tiny 0.001% of the natural energy that is being produced in that area. See New Energy News, June 1994, page 4. So it was in a magazine in 1994. Research conducted by Dr. Nikola Tesla led to his statement in 1891 that the ether behaves as a fluid to solid bodies and as a solid to light and heat, and that under sufficiently high voltage and frequency it could be accessed, which was his hint that free energy and anti-gravity technologies are possible. So let me just stop and say something here. The whole thing of what people talk about, raising your frequency, what that, what you're doing is you're breathing in this energy into your body, this exact energy that they're talking about. You're breathing this energy in through your crown chakra and processing it in your pineal gland to use in different ways to heal your body, to do different things, to these cognitions, I don't know, but anyways, so yeah, behaves as a fluid to solid bodies and as a solid to light and heat. Isn't that interesting? And that under sufficiently high voltage and frequency. So when we're doing meditations and yoga and qigong and all that, well, we're raising our frequency, raising our vibration, raising the heat which our body is able, like the level of heat that our body is able to produce, our mind body spirit complex. We're raising the vibration. Our body is vibrating faster, so there's more heat. So when you put all this into context, it really makes sense. Let us pay special attention to Tesla's statement that the ether has a fluid-like effect when we are dealing with solid objects. This ties in directly with the work of Dr. N.A. Kozyrev. Rethinking Matter. In order to truly grasp Kozyrev's work and related findings, certain new analogies for physical matter are required. Kozyrev's work forces us to visualize all physical objects of matter in the universe as if they were sponges submerged in water. In this analogy, we should consider the sponges as having remained in water for a long enough period of time that they are completely saturated. Bearing this in mind, there are two things we can do with such sponges underwater. We can decrease the volume of water that they contain or increase it by very simple mechanical procedures. 1. Decrease. If a submerged saturated sponge is squeezed, cooled, or rotated, then some of the water inside of it will be released into its surroundings, decreasing its mass. Once the sponge is no longer disturbed, the pressure on the millions of tiny pores is relieved, causing it again to absorb water and expand back into its normal resting mass. 2. Increase. We can also pump more water into the sponge in its rest state, such as by heating or vibrating it, thus causing some of the pores to expand with more water than they can comfortably hold. In this case, we relieve the added pressure. The sponge will naturally release its excess water and shrink back down to its normal resting mass. Though it would seem impossible to most, Kozyrev showed that by shaking, spinning, heating, cooling, vibrating, or breaking physical objects, their weight can be increased or decreased by subtle but definite amounts. And this is but one aspect of his amazing work. Dr. Kozyrev's background. Since the Western world is largely uneducated about Kozyrev, some biographical and research information is in order. Far from being a crank or crackpot scientist, he was in fact considered one of the prominent Russian thinkers of the 20th century. Kozyrev had his scientific paper published at the tender age of 17, and other scientists were amazed by the depth and clarity of his logic. His main work was in astrophysics, where he studied the atmospheres of the sun and other stars, the phenomenon of solar eclipses, and radiation equilibrium. By age 20, he had already graduated from the University of Leningrad with a degree in physics and mathematics, and by age 28, he was widely known as a distinguished astronomer who had taught at several colleges. Kozyrev's abundant life took a most unfortunate and difficult turn in 1936, when he was arrested under the repressive laws of Joseph Stalin, and in 1937 he began 11 torturous years, enduring all the known horrors of a concentration camp. In this state, he mused deeply upon the mysteries of the universe, paying attention to all the patterns that existed in life, wherein so many different organisms show signs of asymmetry or spiraling growth. From his illuminated observations, Kozyrev considered that all life forms might be drawing off an unseen spiraling source of energy, in addition to their normal properties of gaining energy through eating, drinking, breathing, and photosynthesis. And this is where Qigong comes in. But Kozyrev theorized that things such as the direction of a shell's spiraling growth and which side of the human body will contain the heart are determined by the direction of this flow. Should there be an area where somewhere in space-time where the energy flow spiraled in the opposite direction, then he would expect shells to grow in the opposite direction and the heart to be in the opposite side of the body cavity. Kozyrev suggested that life couldn't form in any other way because it is actively drawing off this spiraling energy to sustain itself and must therefore follow its proportions every step of the way. In this case, we can think of the skeletal system as an antenna for this energy, which is why it is important to breathe integrity into the bones, which I speak about that in previous episodes, somewhere around there. When Kozyrev was finally rehabilitated from the prison camp in 1948 and could return to his field of expertise, he made many predictions about the Moon, Venus, and Mars, which were validated by Soviet space probes more than a decade later. This then earned him the distinction of being a major pioneer in the Soviet space race. In 1958, Kozyrev again aroused worldwide controversy by proclaiming that the moon exhibits volcanic activity in the Alphonsus crater. U.S. Nobel Prize winner Harold, is it Urey? was among the small group who believed that Dr. Kozyrev's theory of volcanic activity on the moon is correct, and he urged NASA to conduct an investigation. As a direct result, NASA launched the enormous Moon Blink project, which later confirmed Dr. Kozyrev's assertions by finding significant gas emissions on the moon. However, not all of Kozyrev's work was quite so readily assimilated into the mainstream world of NASA. The science of time. In the winter of 1951 to 52, Dr. Kozyrev began his foray into the world of exotic physics with the first of what became an exhaustive series of 33 years worth of very intriguing, controversial experiments. As we said, the spiraling energy patterns in nature unveiled themselves to the initiated eyes of Dr. Kozyrev while in the concentration camp. His direct knowledge informed him that this spiraling energy was, in fact, the true nature and manifestation of time. Obviously, he felt that time, as we know it, is much more than just a simple function of counting duration. Kozyrev urges us to try to think of a cause for time, something tangible, identifiable in the universe that we can associate with time. After pondering this for a while, we see that time is ultimately nothing but pure spiraling movement. We know that we are tracing a complex spiraling pattern through space thanks to the orbital patterns of the Earth and the solar system. And now, temporology, the science of time, is under continual active investigation by Moscow State University and the Russian Humanitarian Foundation. Inspired by Dr. Kozyrev's pioneering work, on their website, they state, in our understanding, the nature of time is the mechanism that brings about appearing changes and occurring newness in the world. To understand the nature of time is to point a process, a phenomenon, a carrier in the material world whose properties could be identified or corresponded with those of time. This may seem strange at first glance, since a tree falling in your yard could be seen as a result of a strong wind, not of the flow of time. However, you must then ask yourself, what caused the wind to blow? Ultimately, the motion of the earth on its axis is most responsible. Hence, all changes are caused by some form of movement, and without movement there can be no time. Several of the scholars whose papers are published through the Russian Institute of Temporology agree that if Kozyrev had changed his terminologies and used the word time to more common scientific terms such as the physical vacuum or ether, then many more people would have been able to understand his work sooner in the ensuing years. Torsion physics. Here's the good stuff. No, that was a good explanation to get started into what torsion physics is. So, in 1913, Dr. Eli Cartan was the first to demonstrate clearly that the fabric or flow of space and time in Einstein's general theory of relativity not only curves, but it also possesses a spinning or spiraling movement within itself known as torsion. Most people are unaware that it is now generally accepted that the space surrounding the Earth and perhaps the entire galaxy has right-handed spin, meaning that energy is influenced to spin clockwise as it travels through the physical vacuum. According to Sayama et al., static torsion fields are created from spinning sources that do not radiate any energy. However, once you have a spinning source that releases energy in any form, such as the sun or the center of the galaxy, or a spinning source that has more than one form of movement occurring at the same time, such as a planet that is rotating on its axis and revolving around the sun at the same time, then dynamic torsion is automatically produced. This phenomenon allows torsion waves to propagate through space instead of simply staying in a single static spot. Thus, torsion fields like gravity or electromagnetism are capable of moving from one place to another in the universe. Furthermore, Kozyrev proved decades ago that these fields travel at superluminal speeds, meaning that they far exceed the speed of light. If you can have an impulse that moves directly through the fabric of space-time, travels at superluminal velocities, and is separate from gravity or electromagnetism, you have a significant breakthrough in physics, one that demands that a physical vacuum, zero-point energy, or ether must really exist. Torsion field experiments. Dr. Kozyrev's experiments began in the 1950s and were conducted since the 1970s with the ongoing assistance of Dr. V.V. Nasanov, who helped to standardize the laboratory methods and the statistical analysis of the results. Detectors using rotation and vibration were specifically designed and made that would react in the presence of torsion fields, which Kozyrev called the flow of time. It is important to remember that these experiments were conducted under the strictest conditions, repeated in hundreds or in many cases thousands of trials, and were written about in extensive mathematical detail. They have been rigorously peer-reviewed, and Lavrentiev and others have replicated the results independently. That's key right there. Lavrentiev and others have replicated the results independently, and in many cases, thousands of trials. You know, this is okay. So this is the, I think what is the minimum? Is it like 880 experiments, like of the same experiment? Like you do this experiment so many times in order to be scientifically validated or something like that. It is important to remember that these experiments. Okay, so I already read that. I'm gonna have to start doing vocal exercises before I do these. Oh, I'm just talking about like stretching out the cheek muscles and the mouth muscles and stuff. Going back to our earlier analogy, he said that matter behaves somewhat like a sponge in water. If we do something to disturb the structure of the sponge, such as squeeze it, spin it, or vibrate it, then it will release some of its water back into its environment. Over the years, all of the following processes were discovered to create a time flow of torsion waves in the laboratory due to their disruption of matter in some form. The deforming of a physical object, the encounter of an air jet with an obstacle, the operation of an hourglass filled with sand, because all the sand particles are hitting the bottom the absorption of light, friction, burning, the actions of an observer, such as a movement of the head, the heating or cooling of an object, phase transitions in substances, frozen to liquid, liquid to vapor, etc., dissolving and mixing substances, the fading death of plants, non-light radiation from astronomical objects, and sudden changes in human consciousness. Now, there is a really cool experiment of non-light radiation from astronomical objects. I'm not sure if they get into it in this, if David gets into in this, but he talks about it on Wisdom Teachings. What Kozyrev took this this device and he hooked it up to a telescope, but there was no lens in the telescope. He just had the little thing on top where you aim it. So he aimed it at a star, and he was messing around with detecting torsion fields from astronomical objects. What he found to be true is that the light was behind the actual radiation of where the star was coming from. So this radiation was moving through space-time instantly. So the implications of that are massive. And also what he did find was that, okay, you see the light physically with your eye at one point, and then say like you look about 10 to 20 inches to your left in the sky from your perspective. With this device or this instrument, and it's detecting the torsion fields that the star is giving off. So actually, the light is slower than the actual radiation being given off, the 0 point radiation being given off. And what this means is that you can access at any single point in the universe, in any universe, you can act. Well, I'm not sure in any universe, but you can act in this universe for sure. You can access this energy at any single point in the universe, and it's all connected. It's all interconnected. So that's how it's able to travel instantaneously. So then you look at things like Dragon Ball Z, where Goku does the instant transmission. He just thinks about a person's face, and he can transmit his... Basically, his body dematerializes and travels through space through this... probably, most likely through this energy. And so, me learning all this stuff, I'm going back and looking at all the stuff that I learned I was watching as a kid, and like, wow, this stuff actually has some basis in reality. You know, there's actually science that has been suppressed that actually, all this is pretty much, I don't know, at least to me, it seems like everything's that has been talked about on TV, it seems mythical or mythological, it's pretty much true. But let's go. Oh, wait, no. Non-light radiation from... So what he found is that so you got the light here, and then over to your left you have your radiation, your 0 point radiation, right? That's where the star actually is in real time. That's where the star actually is, and we're seeing its light way behind it. So what he saw then was that on each side this radiation fades till it hits the light, and then to the other side it fades out the signal. It gets smaller and it fades out as you go more to the left, and then it kind of starts where it actually is, and then it fades out as you get closer to the actual where the light is, where we see the star in the sky. So what this actually means is that stars and everything in this universe exists in the past, present, and future all at the same time. And that's what this means. Okay? So other than the perplexing final item related to consciousness, we can readily see how each process is disturbing matter in some way, thus causing it to absorb or release minute amounts of this etheric water, which fits perfectly with our sponge analogy. Even more importantly, the fact that strong emotional energy could cause a measurable, at a distance, reaction has been repeatedly documented, not just by Dr. Kozyrev, but many others. And this is where our concepts of physics, phenomena, and consciousness come into the picture. Such concepts became even bigger news after the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks on the United States, when Dean Radin and his team at the Institution of Noetic Sciences were able to measure a tremendous change in the behavior of computerized random number generators surrounding the time immediately before and after the attack. The data show that somehow a change in the mass consciousness of humanity affected the behavior of electromagnetic energy in computer circuits around the world. especially those computers nearest to the North America. This suggests that torsion waves and consciousness are essentially identical manifestations of intelligent energy, aiding and shielding torsion effects. Returning to the more comfortable arena of physical matter, Kozyrev's work showed that the torsion fields can be absorbed, shielded, or sometimes reflected. For example, sugar can be absorbed, polyethylene film and aluminum can shield, and other forms of aluminum or mirrors can reflect. Kozyrev found that in the presence of this energy flow, objects that are rigid and inelastic show weight changes, whereas flexible elastic objects show changes in their elasticity and or viscosity. Kozyrev also showed that the weight of a spinning top changes if it is vibrated, heated or cooled, or if it has electric current passed through it. The Einstein-Cartan theory, which in 1913 established a theoretical basis for the existence of torsion fields, predicts that there is either right-handed or left-handed torsion in space, depending on the location. Subsequent discoveries in quantum mechanics related to the notion of spin confirmed that electrons have right-handed or left-handed spin, meaning that movement will be detected that is either clockwise or counterclockwise. All atoms and molecules maintain varying degrees of balance between right and left-handed spin. Kozyrev determined that strongly right-handed molecules, such as sugar, can shield torsion effects, whereas strongly left-handed molecules, much as turpentine, strengthen them. Subsequent Russian investigations also determined that common polyethylene film acts as an excellent shield for torsion waves. That makes a lot of sense now. And these findings were used in many different experiments, such as those discussed by Dr. Alexander Frolov. Okay. For more data on Kozyrev's experiments, see David Wilcock's complete paper, The Breakthrough of Dr. N.A. Kozyrev, which I emailed them and asked for that, because if you click on it here, it's not going to bring it up. With illustrations and endnotes on his site. Kozyrev and the implications of his work are also mentioned in David's MP3 series, The Science of Peace. And I want to just kind of read this about the author. David Wilcock is a professional lecturer, filmmaker, and researcher of ancient civilizations, consciousness, science, and new paradigms of matter and energy. His upcoming film Convergence unveils the proof that all life on Earth is united in a field of consciousness. David is also the subject and co-author of The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, which explores the remarkable similarities between David and Edgar, features many of David's most inspiring psychic readings, and reveals documented NASA scientific proof of interplanetary climate change and how it is a direct impact on our DNA. Visit the website at which it doesn't have. So there you have it. What I wanted to say, I did that video on the whole pseudo skeptics. Go back and watch that one, the pseudo skeptics one. It talks about Wikipedia. So this is what David puts on his site, and this is what David wanted to put on his Wikipedia. But if you go to his Wikipedia, which I haven't actually, let's go check that. Let's do this in real time. Let's go to Wikipedia. And there it comes right up. All right, wikipedia.org. Let's check it out. Go to David Wilcock. All right, let's just get that going on. See, they don't even have it in there. David Wilcox. That's very mature, guys. It's very mature right there. So if you go back and look at that pseudo-skeptics article that I read, all that information in there, it explains why we see this and not this, and there's no David Wilcock page. So you can go ahead and ask for it to be created. Good luck, Wikipedia. So there's a real-time experiment that I just showed you guys. So, I'm going to start working on Follow That Flow now. So thank you for tuning in to this random episode of Science. It really matters. This really matters because I am showing you something that backs up besides Nassim Haramein, this is another source of information that is backing up Mr. Nassim Haramein's Taurus Tech creations. So, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Hit that like button. Hit that notification button, which is the bell right next to the subscribe button. And also, I got all my links in the description. Go ahead and check it all out. I'll put Divine Cosmos in the description so that you can check this stuff out for yourself. David has tons and tons of really great information for you to learn. Stuff that's been suppressed and is now actually coming out in the open because what he calls the powers that were. He always does that, a silly guy. But yeah, man, check it out. Again, this isn't the only source of information that I go through. I show you a lot of different sources of information every day. So yeah, man. You guys have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on Follow That Flow. Peace. Much love.